Roundabouts can be built to accommodate the turning radii of large trucks and trailers, just like any other intersection. Roundabouts generally have truck aprons, a slightly raised area around the inner circle that provide trucks, buses, and other large vehicles additional room to navigate the roundabout. So what do emergency service providers think about roundabouts? Emergency service providers are able to navigate through roundabouts with their largest vehicles. In emergency situations, roundabouts can be safer and more efficient for an emergency vehicle than traditional intersections. Roundabouts can work very well on a wide range of road types, including freeway interchanges, urban and suburban corridors, and high-speed rural roadways. Some people think they can't be constructed on state roads, but that's just not true. There are numerous examples of successful roundabouts built on state roads, and the number is growing rapidly. The importance of proper design cannot be overstated. Good design is critical to the success of a roundabout. Other keys to success include:
we really kind of see this project in terms of the removal of the tolls as two distinct components, having two distinct components. One of them really is the removal of the tolling equipment. So that includes the readers, the cameras, the servers, and all of the technology that's involved with tolling. And that's what you see before you today. We have an agreement with CAPSH Traffic Com USA, which is the entity that serves as our integrator, which really, it's our systems integrator, which really just means they're the entity that plans, designs, installs, maintains our tolling equipment. So with CAPSH then, we have this change order, which now removes the Cesar Chavez tolling equipment. So again, that's readers, cameras, servers, and the like. Following that, then TxDOT will come in. As we've discussed in the past, we have a maintenance agreement with TxDOT, and they will come in and restripe the roadway. In fact, they've decided now to go with existing contracts rather than procure one, as we had discussed earlier. So they're using their existing contracts to return the roadway back to a non-toll system. So first up will be, as we understand it from TxDOT, we understand that they will restripe, and that could happen as early as the next couple of weeks. And then after that, they have another contract that they will issue a change order for to remove the gantries and the heavier signs and equipment. So that's how we're seeing this toll removal process unfold. So again, item number 4 then before you is a little over $41,000 for the removal of the cameras, readers, and servers. It's a change order with CAPSH. Subject to your questions, I would recommend approval.
Any questions?
I do have one. Where is the server room?
So the servers are actually at the, they're in the bridge division facility at Zaragoza. Is it? I can't remember. It's one of the bridges. So it's either Zaragoza or Stanton.
Okay. Curiosity, Madam Chair.
Mr. Parker?
What do you plan to do with the equipment?
That's a good question. So we have been looking at potentially reusing some of it. Unfortunately, most of it can't be reused. The idea originally was that we could use some of those cameras and readers for replacement parts and that sort of thing for Border West Expressway. However, because of the number of years that have passed since we designed and installed Chavez, and when Border West will go in, not a lot of that equipment can actually be used that way. So honestly, what we will likely do is provide it to TxDOT for salvage.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Second. Been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item number 4 has been approved. Item number 5, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute change order number 5 with Jordan Foster Construction regarding a change to the size of trees for the East Lake Boulevard Phase 2 project from the 2013 El Paso County Comprehensive Mobility Plan. Mr. Teos.
Thank you. I've got a very brief PowerPoint, really just 2 slides on this item. So as read into the record, we are talking about change order number 5 with Jordan Foster for East Lake Boulevard Phase 2. As you know, this project is part of the 2013 El Paso County Comprehensive Mobility Plan. which includes all of the projects identified on this slide here. You've got the red arrow showing specifically East Lake Boulevard Phase 2 down in the bottom right-hand corner. So that's the project we're talking about. This is a spreadsheet we've been showing you with each of the change orders as we bring them forward. The item before you today is number 5, and specifically this item deals with an issue that the contractor had with the plans that required a certain caliper, a 3-inch caliper tree that was going to be added for landscaping along this roadway. They couldn't find 3 inches. Our general engineering consultant did a check as well. They searched local and regional landscapers and could not find that size either. So they agreed to, and this, as with all of these change orders under the Comprehensive Mobility Plan, it's gone through the county for review and concurrence, and they have concurred. So the agreement was to reduce the size of the trees from a 3-inch caliper down to a 2-inch, and that results in a savings to the project of $4,350. So that's all I have for you on this item. Subject to your questions, I would request approval.
Any questions for Mr. Taz?
We ought to frame this one. I don't think
know,
I've
it's
ever.
a reduction.
I've never
You gotta
seen a
be
frame
excited.
order for a reduction.
These are nice. Yes.
Wish there were some more zeros after that. but- Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'm open for a
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, item number 5 has been approved. Item number 6, discussion and action on the following instruments as they relate to the addition of a new median crossover to the old Waco Tanks project from the 2013 El Paso County Comprehensive Mobility Plan. A, board resolution authorizing the chair to execute an interlocal agreement with the city of Socorro, Texas. And B, board resolution authorizing change order number 6 to the construction contract with International Eagle Enterprises. Mr. Tez.
Thank you. So again, Old Waco Tanks, and this is on the screen for you now. This is the same map with a different arrow shown identifying the Old Waco Tanks Road project. So this is essentially the extension of East Lake south of I-10. So the red arrow shows you where that is. This project deals specifically with, as you can see on your screen now, change order number 6, which is the request for a new median crossover that is being requested by and will be funded by a developer. So let me break down this item. It's a little bit convoluted, I think you could say. Old Waco Tanks, as you know, is in the Comprehensive Mobility Plan, which means that most of it is funded through the Vehicle Registration Fee Bond Program. On this one, we also received TxDOT funding, or federal funding through TxDOT. However, there is a developer that owns land on both sides of this roadway that has requested the addition of a crossover, a median crossover. That developer approached the Regional Mobility Authority and the county and asked for this. The result of that additional work is a change order of $41,652.50. So what we've done is the developer actually went to the city of Socorro and asked them for approval to do this because this project is within the rights of way of the city of Socorro, and in fact will be maintained by the city of Socorro upon completion. So the city of Socorro is the proposed agreement before you as item 6A is an interlocal agreement between the city of Socorro and the Regional Mobility Authority, whereby the city of Socorro grants all of the rights of entry that we need to construct this roadway, but also provides the funding from the developer to the Regional Mobility so that we can actually complete this additional work. So item 6A then is the interlocal between the city and the RMA, whereby they provide the funding to us. And item 6B then is a change order between the Regional Mobility Authority and the construction contractor, in this case, International Eagle Enterprises, where we authorize International Eagle to actually implement the change order using the funds provided under 6A. So a little bit convoluted, but you've seen relationships like this before. I think it makes sense. So subject to your questions, I would also recommend approval of both items 6A and 6B.
I do have one question, Madam Chair.
Mr. Wardy.
I'm not, what exactly are they doing? I mean, it all looks great.
So the median crossover, there's a median running between the north and southbound lanes.
Right.
This cuts that. It's a cut so that the developer actually has ingress and egress through the median cut.
Oh, so it's
that'll
like
So
Adding
that,
a
for
turn
example.
lane.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
That allows, basically, if
Yeah.
you're heading northbound, you'll be able to get into a left turn
Okay.
lane and head into the developer's property.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Open for a motion?
Motion to approve?
Thank you.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, item number 6 is approved. Item number 7, discussion and action on board resolutions to authorize the executive director to execute service agreements with the El Paso Electric Company for the El Paso streetcar project for the following locations. A, new track switch at 250 East Franklin. B, new track switch at 600 South Santa Fe. Mr. Tez.
Yes, ma'am. So I have another very brief PowerPoint for this one as well. You've seen this one before, actually. I've come before you on service agreements for the streetcar project before. So you'll recognize the agenda and most of the details here. So just by way of background, the El Paso Electric Company requires a service agreement with any entity that requests service from the electric company in which a new transformer is required to be placed for that service. To date, we've actually had requested the electric company to install 4 different transformers to date, and those are for the TPS A1 through A4. As a reminder, that's a traction power substation. Those are the power stations for the streetcar. So A1, A2, A3, and A4, all required service agreements, and those have been completed, and those are in fact installed. I should mention too, when we enter into these service agreements, the requirement of the electric company is that we pay up front as well once we sign the agreements, and then they do the work. The remaining 2 transformers that are required are required for a power switch at 250 East Franklin and another one at 600 South Santa Fe Street. So those 2. Then here's a map for you that identifies each of those locations. So going from left to right, you see left on the left side TPSS A1, that's the power station at UTEP. A2 is the power station on Crosby, and then you go down and you see the powered turnout on Franklin, that's the switch. There's an unpowered turnout which does not require a transformer, and you can go through the rest of the map there. Ultimately though, we're looking at a power switch on Franklin and a power switch at the downtown transfer center. Those are the 2 items we're looking at today. So as I mentioned, A1 through A4, those are complete. Now you may remember I've been before you with this item before as we were going through the A1 through A4 service agreements. At that time, we did not believe that we needed a new switch at 250 East Franklin. And that was because there is a transformer there. And the original plans called for phase 1 power for that switch. The transformer in that area could have handled that. However, what we've realized later is that the switches that are being used for this particular project actually require 3-phase power. So that means then that the original transformer that was going to cover 250 East Franklin no longer covers it. We have to add a new transformer. So that's what gives rise to this agreement under 7A. 7B, then you'll remember we actually did come back and did enter into a service agreement, but again, same issue. It was for a single phase. We actually need a 3-phase. So what we're doing under item 7B then is 2 things really. You're authorizing the execution of a new service agreement for a 3-phase power supply, and you're also authorizing me to terminate the original switch service agreement for the single-phase power. That results in a credit to us, which you can see here. We're looking at amounts not to exceed of $8,000 for these individual transformers. On Santa Fe, though, we will receive a credit of $1,970.81. That was the original price for the single-phase power supply provided for 600 South Santa Fe. So all of these costs were anticipated and included within the available project budget. So what's being requested today, obviously subject to your questions, is a motion to approve board resolutions to authorize the executive director to execute service agreements for the track switch at 250 East Franklin and the track switch at 600 South Santa Fe, and as noted, to also authorize me to terminate the prior service agreement for the switch at 600 South Santa Fe.
Questions?
Now, where are the transformers? Are they underground or?
These transformers, I want to say, are overhead, but let me get you
Okay.
an answer from from the contractor.
Any other questions? Or
Move to approve.
Second?
It's been moved and approved. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, item 7 is approved. Item number 8, presentation and discussion on the following performance reports for the fourth quarter fiscal year 2017. A, El Paso Bike Share. B, Cesar Chavez Express Toll Lane. C, General Engineering Consultant Team's use of local resources. Mr. Chase, you're doing the bike share. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So I'll handle item 8A, the Sun Cycle quarterly report. So this quarterly report covers the fourth quarter of 2017. So here's the map. We always start off with the map to show the station locations. And as a reminder, as we do each quarter, these reports will be posted online for the public right after this meeting. So here's the summary of activities. You'll see that fourth quarter added there to fiscal year 17 over towards the right. We had over 6,700 rides taken in this particular quarter, which resulted in additional miles added of 33,881. It was a strong quarter. You'll also see the carbon offset there, additional 32,000 pounds and 1.3 million calories burned in this particular quarter. So the totals there are at the end. When you look at the total rides taken, we've had to date, and this includes just shy of 2 full years. It's because if you remember the very first quarter of 2016, we actually started late into September, but close to 2 full years, we've had over 30,500 rides. We've ridden a total of 158,000 miles. That results in 150,000 pounds of carbon offset and also calories burned in excess of 6.3 million. So a nice, strong couple of years. Here are some performance report program highlights from this quarter and recapping the 2 years. So you'll note that first button there notes that in fiscal year 17 we had a total of 18,449 rides, whereas in 16 we had 12,062 rides. So it shows a sizable increase this year over last. Saturday remains the most active day, which is now followed by Sunday. Now this third bullet point is an important one for this particular quarter. As you know, the fourth quarter is always or I say always, after 2 years, right? After 2 years, it shows to be our very strong quarter. However, we really were impacted this particular quarter by weather. We had 38 rain events in July and August, which are our strongest months in this past year. 7 of the 9, and this is a really important point because when you look at the second bullet, Saturday remains our most active day. 7 of the 9 Saturdays in that period were received rain events. So that really impacted our revenues in this particular quarter. In fact, you can see that when you go back to this slide, you can see the quarter of 2016 had 7,000 rides, whereas the quarter quarter 16 had 7,000 rides, quarter of 17 had 6,700 rides. So that shows you the impact of weather. We've begun, and this is actually a best practice that we learned actually on our own, but through coordination with other systems throughout the country, we realized that we needed to start monitoring weather to see how it's impacting us. So we're actually beginning a pretty robust monitoring system for weather. So anyhow, that's a big bullet point for this particular quarter. However, because we did so strongly in the other quarters, we were actually able to do quite well over the year. San Jacinto remains the station with the most checkouts. This is followed by Pioneer Plaza and Cleveland Square. That remains consistent over the last few quarters. However, Ballpark West, which is actually the fairly one of the newer stations that we added on the west side of the ballpark, right on Durango, right by the entrance to the ballpark on the west side, that actually took over the spot that was originally controlled by Anthony Street down in the Union Plaza. So that means that folks are actually starting more rides from the ballpark west than they were on Anthony Street. So that's a bit of a change. Rides in quarter 4 show a single peak period between 8 and 10. That expanded a little bit this quarter than over last. Last quarter, the peak was between 8 and 9 p.m. Now, the two most common routes in this quarter remain round trips, and those are San Jacinto back to San Jacinto and Pioneer Plaza back to Pioneer Plaza. The third route, however, was a hybrid that actually folks are starting at Pioneer and ending up at San Jacinto, whereas in the last quarter, it was a round trip from Cleveland Square. So those are some of the program highlights. This is the actual quarter report that we always provide. As I mentioned, this information goes online, so this is really for the benefit of the public so they can run through this information at their leisure. Most of this has been summarized by what I've already said. This shows trip volume by duration and by membership type, and volume by day of week. You're seeing Saturday still outpace Sunday, and that's where you see the bottom graph there shows the peak period that I mentioned earlier. This is the financial activity, and this shows the first two years along with the initial expenditures for the capital expenses. So through quarter four, we have the remaining balance of $454,000, just shy of $455,000 within our operating budget going into the future. So that's all I have for you, subject to your questions on the Sun Cycle
How are
report.
we impacted by the events downtown? I know we've talked a little bit about that, but how,
Right.
because we've had a lot of events downtown.
We have, and in fact, actually, that was another item that I meant to add, but clearly I forgot. We are impacted negatively by most events, and that's because when most of the events that are happening now, they tend to serve alcohol. And when they do that, they have to enclose the area, and most events are happening in San Jacinto Plaza. So they'll normally enclose our station within their perimeter, so you can't get bikes in or out. In fact, we normally, unfortunately, we've got this pattern where we're finding out after the fact, we're having to go in and pull our bikes out. We've begun working with the Downtown Management District, which manages a lot of those permits for downtown events. So we're now included in those conversations earlier, and we've been talking with the folks that are doing the downtown events about incorporating our system into their events, providing promo codes so that event goers can ride the bikes into the event and that sort of thing. So we're doing a little more outreach, trying to get a little more proactive on those events. But yeah, they have heard us.
Any other questions for Mr. Taylor?
A couple. So what happens at the end of this when our grant, our O&M funds remaining are gone?
Right. So that is where our sponsorship program comes in. And so that what we've done, and this was all by design, and you may remember some of this conversation, but for the benefit of our new member in the public, the way that this program was envisioned was that we went and got grant funding twice, actually, for phase one and then for phase two. The original program had $720,000. We bought 80 bikes and 8 stations under that phase one, and the rest of the funds that were remaining were squirreled away for operations while we built up our ridership numbers that would then feed our sponsorship program. So that's where we are now. So we did the same exact approach with phase two. We had $584,000, and we bought capital. We had capital expenditures to add an additional 80 bikes and 8 stations. So with that, then that's how, in fact, we get to this remaining balance. So we have the $454,000 for our operations and expenses, operational expenses, while we bring up our promotional program. So the answer is fares, which you see the revenues generated in quarter four were $32,000, and then the balance there is covered by the remaining funds. However, the sponsorship program should be kicking in here before too long, and that's ultimately the answer.
One more question, if I may. Liability-wise, what's our liability if somebody is riding a bike and they are injured?
Minimal, because there is a, and I forget the term for it, there's a policy that the rider, the users enter into. That's an agreement that they enter into when they check it out. It's very similar to when you, there was a specific example I can't remember off the top of my head, but anyhow, the liability is shifted to the user once they agree to the terms that they have to in order to actually check out the bike.
Okay. The reason I ask is, you mentioned that we work with the Downtown Management District to maybe allow access to the bikes into the event, but if we have alcohol impaired people renting the bikes and everybody's fine until somebody gets hurt, I was just concerned about liability.
So
Everybody's looking to blame it on somebody else when they make a mistake, so.
Agreed. So honestly, though, we have that now. The majority of our riders are late at night in the downtown area
Saturday
going from
nights.
bars and restaurants on Saturdays. So you pretty much get the idea of who the demographic is that are currently using the bikes. But the answer is ultimately that the liability is very limited by the terms of use that are agreed to by the users.
Thank you, Mr. Tess.
Yes, sir.
No other questions? Then we'll move on to B.
Item 8B, we have David Head with us today to provide the performance report for Cesar Chavez. And I would mention, obviously, this is for the most recent quarter. This is the last performance report that we will have because, as you know, the tolls have been suspended, and they were suspended in this fourth quarter of 2017. So with that, I'll ask Mr. Head to provide an update to you.
Good morning, David Head with the GEC.
Good morning.
And this is going to be the Cesar Chavez quarterly report. And as Mr. Tejas mentioned, it's probably the last quarterly report for the Cesar Chavez. And also, as you will remember, the tolls were turned off on August 9th at midnight. And we'll be trying to salvage some of that equipment around August the 20th, 21st, something like that. So with that, these are the transactions per working day, and this is the data for that. So the gray column over on the left side is what I'll be talking to, and the quarter for quarter 4 is June, July, and August. It's down at the bottom of the page and it's highlighted there. So transactions per working day is defined as Monday through Friday. And this is the amount of cars that go through there in June, July, and August per working day. So this is the graph for that. And if you go all the way across to the quarter 4, what you would want to look at is the purple bar, which is for FY 2017. And it's the June, July, August bar. And what I'm understanding and told is that in the summer months, usually things will taper off because people aren't going to school and everybody's on vacation, so on and so forth. So we're running around 1,000 transactions per working day right now, or in that quarter. So let's talk about the total transactions. That's the purple columns, or I'm sorry, the blue columns right there. And let me define some of the terms. AVI, as you'll remember, are the toll tags. So anybody that has a toll tag that goes through the gantry will be picked up there, and then you've got the pay-by-mail people, the PBMs, which they don't have a toll tag, they go through there, they get a bill for it. And then you have the totals down at the bottom. So the highlights down at the bottom will tell you what those numbers are, and it's again for June, July, and August. And then the other column over there is the AVI penetration. And what that is a percentage of what is picked up through the gantry for the toll tag people. So there's 25% toll tag users are going through there for, say, the month of June in quarter 4. So this is the graphic for that. It's a pretty busy graphic, but we can distill it down to the right side over there for quarter 4. And what you'll see is you've got several fiscal years, but the purple one again is for fiscal year 17, June, July, and August. And the bar is red over to the left side on the left axis, vertical axis. And you've got the pay-by-mail and the AVI stacked right there to tell you what those numbers or what those bars represent. And then you've got the gray line that goes across there. And that's the penetration, and you would read that from the right side of the graph, and that's in a percentage for each of those months. Excuse me. So the total revenue is the next thing I wanted to talk about, and that's the green columns over there. So what we've normally talked about is the forecast versus the collected. and you've got the toll tag users, the pay by mail, then the totals for both forecast and collected. And down at the bottom highlighted is the Q4. And you can see those numbers down below there. But if we go to the graphic, what you will excuse me, what you will see is that for FY17 and Q4, you've got the forecasted is the gold bar, and the purple bar is what was actually collected. So these are the revenue and expenses for 2017, and the revenue is the actual collected, so it was 225,000 and change, and then the expenses were at the 436,000 mark, and that was for 2017 total. So let's talk about the veteran waiver program. And in there, there were, you can't see August, I think, because it's blocked by the menu down there, but I don't know how you get rid of that. Well, the takeaway is there were no veteran tags issued in, excuse me, June, July, and August. And there was around, I believe it was, it's 2.9% of the total transactions were the veteran waiver program from the total. And with that, I will entertain questions.
Mr. Head, what happens, how long are we going to continue to collect for any outstanding fees that are due?
That's a good question.
And what happens with individuals that have balances on their toll tag?
So that's one of the areas that we're working on. As we discussed before, there's really several components to unwinding a toll facility, and one of them is the lanes and lane striping and signs and the infrastructure and all that sort of thing. So we're hitting that as we discussed earlier. The other part of that, though, are the agreements and then the actual winding down of the financial aspects of it. We have a number of invoices out that are still being processed. So I'm going to come to you probably in a matter of months with different breakouts of all of those other things that we have to deal with. Another example is there are individuals that have overpaid their bills, so we have a fund for overpaid invoices. We have some that are return checks and that sort of thing. So we have all sorts of little other things that we'll have to bring to you to unwind. And part of that too, though, is the enforcement program. So if you remember, the RMA board several years ago implemented an enforcement program that uses the municipal courts to enforce the collection of those fees. So if someone incurred an appropriate toll fee, then they're going through that enforcement program that was directed by the board several years back. So we also have to figure out how to deal with that as well. Now, the interesting part is that while we've unwound Cesar Chavez, we have Border West Expressway that's coming online before too long. So we're going to have to merge these two, one which is winding down and another one that's ramping up. So we've got some work to do to unwind a lot of those other issues like this.
So if you have a toll tag, you could still use it at the Border West. So
yes, ma'am, exactly. And in fact, the toll tags that are out there today can still be used throughout the state of Texas. In fact, actually, it's expanded since into, I want to say, Oklahoma and some other states as well that have recently partnered up with the state. So the tags are still valid. There's just no location to use them in El Paso right now until Border West Expressway comes online.
okay. Any other questions, Mr. Head? Okay. Thank you. And then you're going to do item C.
Good morning, David Head with the GEC again, and this is the local use of resources by the GEC. So we'll go through the labor expenditures data, then we'll have the graphs, and we'll go through the firm's summary, and then any questions you may have. So this is the quarterly summary that you've seen before, and we keep adding to it. We're probably going to have to condense this down a little bit just because it's starting to grow on the page and it's hard to read. But down, the way you read this is if starting from the left to the right, you've got the quarters we'll be talking about, or I'll be talking about quarter 34. It's May to July in 2017. As you work across the page to the right, the local labor is the dollar amounts used for that quarter, and then the percentage for the quarter. And then you have the non-local, and same scenario there, then the total labor expenses, total billing. And then if you go all the way down to the bottom of the page, you've got the life-to-date expenditures for the local labor, and then the percentage use of the local labor, and same thing for the non-local labor, and so on and so forth. So with that, the May through July, we spent, or it was expended $950,000 and change, and we used 91% local labor for that. And the total life to date is the $18 million and change, and it was 57% use of local labor. So this is the summary from all that data that you just saw. And if the way you read this very busy page is you go all the way across down at the bottom, and quarter 34 is what I'm talking about. The gold bar is the local labor, and you would read that back across to the left side of the vertical axis, and that would give you the dollar amounts for that versus the non-local, which is the purple bar. And then you have two lines there. The gray line is the percent local for the quarter, and you would read that across to the right side as a percentage. And also for the purple bar, that's the local cumulative for this total project, or for the total GEC, and that would be also read to the right as a percentage. This is the summary by firm for all the GEC firms that we have on board. And down at the bottom, you'll see the numbers, 57%, and the total amount. And you've got local, non-local, total labor.
What's the time, excuse me?
Go ahead.
What's
Mr.
the
Warren.
time period for this?
It's the same as for the quarter. Oh, no, this is going to be the total life to date.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, what are the
Smith?
benchmarks for what are our goals for percentage for local?
I don't know that we.
Mr. Smith, we don't have goals for local. In fact, in the state of Texas, we're not permitted to provide incentives for local participation. However, this board has expressed an interest in local participation, so this is how we monitor it.
Right, we've always encouraged that, and I think we've done a pretty good job of that. On maybe going out future, if it's okay with the board, maybe we just look at in total by fiscal year and not do every single quarter for the last 5 years or whatever, maybe through, unless everyone wants to see it by quarter. But I think you can maybe summarize it, just our fiscal year, our total fiscal year totals, and then give us maybe quarterly for 2016, 2017, and or if that's okay, because it is getting really busy and harder to read, and I think if we just have those totals. Obviously the trends, is what we're looking for, and I think the trends have been very positive. So if you all would maybe look at that with Mr. Tez and see if we can simplify that. I think it'd be easier for everyone to read, I think.
Absolutely, we can do that.
Any other comments or questions, Mr.
I
Warding?
have one question, just for point of clarification. I think it's great what we're doing here. I just want to make sure that we validate the definition of local.
Certainly. So, and that's a good
Done
point.
that.
In fact, that's a really good point for Mr. Smith in particular. The RMA several years back made a determination to approach the reporting like this, which is a very different way than most other entities do this type of thing. Most entities have struggled with how to define local, and what they'll do is they'll either identify the number of years that an entity has been in El Paso and whether they have an office here and those types of things. But as pointed out, I think the most interesting point that had been made in these various discussions, because lots of entities struggle with this, as you can imagine. The Greater Chamber of Commerce noted at one point that Walmart was considered local under a certain entity's evaluation of local versus non-local. So what this RMA did is a little bit different. I'm not aware of anybody else doing it quite like this. What we've done is we've actually looked for local labor impact. So what we're doing is we're looking at each of the entities that actually provides work for us, and of those entities, are those employees that are doing the work for the RMA, are they living in El Paso? Are they shopping in El Paso? Are they paying mortgages here? Are they having that local impact that we're looking for? So in that scenario, that's why we're a little bit different than everybody else. By way of example, Atkins, which is an international huge firm, David Head is a part of the Atkins firm. However, David Head's labor goes towards the local category that we're looking at, because his home is here in the region, he shops here, he pays his mortgage here, and all those types of things. So that's how we do it. We're looking at local labor. Now, when Atkins uses an employee out of Austin or some other city, then those funds fall into the non-local category. So that's how we do it.
One more.
No,
Do we
please.
audit that information, or is it voluntarily submitted by the contractors?
So that's actually, we've not audited, but it's certainly a good idea, and we can start looking at it.
Oh, I'm just bringing it up for discussion.
We've not done it in the past. No, sir.
Okay.
Have we been impacted by the hurricanes in terms of labor loss?
I could say just for my own firm that when I'm looking for inspectors, they're very hard to find right now because they're either tied up on the border west, or they may have gone over to Houston or something like that. But I know the prices of materials have gone up now. I haven't talked to any of the contractors recently, but I know that we're starting to get some inquiries about the change in prices for materials and the cost impacts to those on some of the projects we have.
Good question. Yeah, very good. Any other questions or comments? Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Head. All right. There's no other business coming before the RMA. I'd be open for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so the RMA is now adjourned on October 11th at 9:44. Thank you. Thank you.